Hey guys, tonight we're diving headfirst into the dusty breath of ancient Egypt, a world where your mouth might smell like date beer and roasted duck by mid-morning, and we're solving that problem wasn't just cosmetic, it was spiritual survival. Picture this, you're walking through the humid, incense-laced streets of Thebes, sandals flapping, linen clinging to your back, and every inhale tastes like sweat, dust, and camel. You're not even halfway to the market, and already your tongue feels like it's been embalmed. It's not your fault, though. No one in 1500 BCE is brushing with fluoride. Mouths are full of honey-soaked figs, garlic, and the occasional unfortunate beetle. The Nile may give life, but the fumes that rise from its banks? Let's just say they don't exactly whisper fresh. And here's the kicker, this isn't just an inconvenience, it's dangerous. In a world ruled by ritual, your breath could be the difference between touching a god statue and being cursed for desecrating it. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're listening from, and what time it is in your corner of the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're lying on a woven reed mat, the morning sun a hot coin pressing through thin cloth. Someone nearby is already chewing noisily. You turn your head and catch the glint of gold leaf on their teeth, and the smell. Oh, the smell. It hits you like yesterday's offering left too long in the heat. Even the priests, supposedly pure in every bodily way, seem to be waging a constant war against whatever foulness creeps up from their bellies. You trudge past the temple gardens, hoping for a breath of lotus-laced wind, but the air clings thick with old smoke and dried fish. Somewhere behind the walls, the high priest is preparing for the dawn liturgy, and you know what that means, ceremonial proximity. He'll be inches from the statue of Ammonius, chanting ancient hymns and exhaling right onto the sacred surface. If his breath carries even a whiff of mortal decay, that's sacrilege. And no one wants to be remembered as the priest who accidentally offended a god with garlic breath. Historians still argue whether this fixation on oral cleanliness was ritual, medicinal, or just social horror, but temple records hint that priestly circles developed elaborate breath-freshening customs well before toothbrushes were even a dream. You've heard of one technique, chewing small balls made from frankincense, cinnamon, and honey. Sometimes rolled in crushed mint leaves. Sometimes in powdered charcoal, which sounds like chewing on burnt offerings but was apparently all the rage for mouth purification. Your job today is lowly but vital, helping the apothecary's apprentice refill the temple's breath freshener jars. Each jar is sacred, shaped like a lion's head and sealed with beeswax. The recipe? Supposedly gifted by Thoth himself. In reality, it's a messy mix of imported spices and whatever the last batch of scribes didn't finish licking. You watch the apprentice open a pouch of ground cinnamon. He sneezes violently. The sneeze echoes against the stone walls like a divine warning. "Hold the bowl steady," he says, pouring in powdered frankincense. "Last week, I spilled this and the high priest said my soul reeked." You hold it, and you can't help but notice, the scent is oddly delightful. Warming. It covers not just the sour funk of the storage room, but the dull fatigue in your mind. There's a reason the wealthy carry sachets of this stuff around their necks. One good chew, and you might just believe you're divine. Of course, not everyone in Thebes is so lucky. Out on the streets, common folk resort to chewing reeds or date pits. Some even pop in dried peppermint soaked in vinegar, one of those experimental cures that works half the time and causes nosebleeds the other. There's also the old trick of rinsing with beer. Not water. Beer. Because apparently alcohol kills whatever's festering in your molars. Quirky as it sounds, beer rinsing isn't just folklore. It shows up in old tomb illustrations, alongside jars labeled mouth-cleansing tincture. Historians still argue whether this meant beer mixed with herbs, or just straight-up morning chugging. Either way, it beats the alternative, crocodile dung chews. Yeah, that was real. Some scrolls suggest the stuff had medicinal value. You sincerely hope you never meet the person who tested that theory. By mid-afternoon, you're walking home with a single minty ball tucked behind your molars. It's not called a mignonette, but it is what it is, a homemade breath-freshening lozenge. Sweet, spiced, gritty, and slightly sticky, thanks to the honey that holds it all together. You pass a group of children huddled by the bakery, daring each other to sniff a failed batch someone threw out. Their faces scrunch in horror. One girl nearly gags. You laugh, even as the spice burns lightly on your tongue. You're not just fresh, you're ancient Egypt fresh. And that, my friend, is a rare kind of power. You wake before the sun, which is unfortunate, because nothing good ever happens in ancient Egypt before sunrise, unless you're a temple priest, and even then it's debatable. The wind is cool against your skin, but not cool enough to erase the film in your mouth. You sit up slowly, groaning, and the taste hits you like a sandstorm: last night's lentil stew, a hint of goat cheese, and something suspiciously metallic. Charming. You're not alone in this. Around you, other priest initiates are already stumbling to their feet, faces still puffy from sleep, lips crusted with salt. The air in the dormitory smells like linen and old mouths. But there's no time for self-pity. Ritual waits for no one. In half an hour, you'll be chanting sacred texts directly into the ears of the statue that's allegedly inhabited by a god. If your breath offends him, lightning might not strike, but your high priest's staff might. The temple's purification routine is notoriously intense. You bathe, shave your body with a flint blade, rub natron across your skin until it stings, and then, finally, gather around the purification altar. There's a bowl of what looks like crushed figs and herbs waiting for you there. You eye it suspiciously. Chew, the elder priest commands. You obey, and immediately regret it. It's chalky and bitter, with a strange aftertaste of licorice and something burnt. Still, you chew. You chew because tradition says the breath must be clean before the mouth can praise. Historians still argue whether this step was spiritual symbolism or an early form of oral hygiene, but either way, your jaw hurts by the end of it. You glance around. Some of the others look like they're chewing with the zeal of true believers. Others chew like they're trying not to retch. One poor soul is pale and clutching his throat. Too much asafoetida, someone whispers. Ah, yes. The devil's resin. Great for warding off demons, terrible for morning rituals. Once inside the inner sanctuary, everything becomes more serious. You feel it in your bones, the hush, the weight of incense hanging like a fog, the glow of torchlight flickering against hieroglyphs carved by hands long turned to dust. You kneel. You breathe carefully. Your tongue sticks to the roof of your mouth, coated in bitter paste and tension. The god statue looms above you, eyes of lapis, smile frozen in eternal calm. Your breath wafts upward, toward that sacred stone face, and you pray, not for favor, not for glory, but that you don't smell like garlic this morning. Because garlic, while revered for its healing properties, is strictly forbidden in temples. One careless clove and you're cleaning latrines for a week. You finish your chant and back away, heart pounding. No lightning. No staff. Just the muffled sound of another initiate chewing behind you, his breath wafting forward like an offering of herbs in desperation. Outside, the sun is rising. Birds call from the reeds. The Nile glistens like a ribbon of fire. You sit on a stone bench and let the breath-mint ball dissolve slowly behind your teeth. It's spiced with cinnamon, myrrh, and just a hint of cardamom. Rumor says the recipe came from a traveling healer who once revived a vizier with nothing but spice and a slap to the face. You can believe it. The spice tickles your throat and wakes you up better than cold water. For a brief moment, you feel fresh. Divine, even. A senior priest joins you, his breath surprisingly pleasant. They say Queen Hatshepsut chewed these every morning, he says, offering another pellet. She believed it made her voice more commanding. Did it work? She ruled as a pharaoh for 20 years. You tell me. You nod and pocket the pellet. Breath mints, it seems, are not just for courtesy, they're power. Influence. Intimidation in cinnamon form. Of course, not everyone is on board. Some of the older priests mutter about foreign practices creeping into the rituals. It used to be about piety, one grumbles. Now it's about mouth perfume. But even he keeps a jar of sweet lozenges under his mat. Because no one wants to be the priest remembered for making a god gag. Later that evening, you watch two novices argue over a batch of toothpaste. One insists it needs more honey. The other swears by ground mint and a touch of date syrup. You taste both, for science, and nearly lose a molar on an uncrushed clove. You spit it out and declare the experiment a draw. But the debate lingers. Historians still argue whether these breath remedies were shared openly or kept as temple secrets. Some scrolls hint at a guild of apothecaries who guarded their recipes like state treasures. Others suggest every temple had its own blend, one for funerals, one for sunrise rites, one just for awkward meetings with rival priests. As night falls, the temple quiets. You sit by the garden, chewing one final mint. The stars blink above like cold diamonds. Your breath, for once, smells faintly of honey and spice, not desperation. And in the hush of the courtyard, you realize, cleanliness might be next to godliness, but fresh breath? That's divine diplomacy. You've barely rubbed the sleep from your eyes when the apothecary's assistant waves you over, frantically gesturing with ink-stained fingers. He's hunched beside a stone mixing table in the back corner of the herb hall, surrounded by crumpled papyrus scraps and jars of what looks like powdered sand, black paste, and suspicious clumps of something fibrous. "You're late," he says, eyes darting like a mongoose that's had too much date wine. "We've got a bulk order from the House of Life. They want 40 lozenges before noon, and none of them are allowed to kill a priest mid-chant." You nod, which is somehow worse than groaning, and slide onto the bench beside him. The air is thick with clove smoke and dried lotus petals. Somewhere nearby, someone's boiling something that smells like a dying fig tree. This is your glamorous life now, apprentice medmaker for the spiritual elite. You begin with the base, honey. Thick, golden, sticky enough to make your fingers clump together. Then the powdered herbs, cinnamon for warmth, myrrh for preservation, and crushed juniper berries, because someone swears it makes people look wiser. You're about to stir when the assistant drops a glob of something grayish-brown into the bowl. "Is that?" You start, squinting. "Crocodile dung," he confirms. You recoil so hard you nearly knock over a jar of dried thyme. "That's not part of the recipe." He shrugs, far too casually. "It's not technically forbidden, and it's antimicrobial." You stare at him, trying to decide if this is a prank, a cult test, or just Tuesday. But sure enough, one of the old medicinal scrolls nearby lists crocodile dung, alongside lizard tail extract and powdered donkey teeth, as ingredients in some early chewing pellets. Historians still argue whether this was practical medicine, spiritual metaphor, or the ancient Egyptian version of influencer detox teas. "I'll just leave that part out," you mutter. "Suit yourself." But some of the higher priests swear by it. You quietly wonder if their breath smells like the Nile marshes in midsummer. As you roll the mixture into marble-sized pellets, the assistant starts chatting like this is perfectly normal. Back in the reign of Amenhotep, they used dried papyrus ash too. Charcoal's great for scrubbing breath rot. One guy tried mixing it with mint oil and sesame. Called it Black Thunder. Tasted like sadness. You let out a sleepy chuckle. The idea of chewing charcoal to freshen your breath sounds like trying to clean your clothes by setting them on fire. But it worked, sometimes. Some of the old nobles actually paid extra for ash mints that promised to whiten teeth and scare off mouth demons. You hold up one of your finished balls and squint at it critically. It's a little lopsided, and definitely sticky, but it smells not bad. Sweet. Spicy. A hint of warmth that lingers in the nose. The assistant tosses one in his mouth, chews thoughtfully, and makes a face. Too much fenugreek. Tastes like licking a sandal. You adjust the ratios and try again. By late morning, the floor is littered with failed test batches, your arms ache from pounding herbs, and your tongue has gone numb from quality assurance. But eventually, you get it right. A warm, balanced lozenge that actually makes you feel cleaner from the inside out. You've chewed worse. You've smelled worse. This is almost luxurious. One of the temple guards drops by to pick up the order. He chews one on the spot, nods approvingly, then pockets 5 more for later. Which probably means before yelling at someone important. As you clean up, the assistant tells you a story about a healer in Memphis who once saved a governor's life, not with herbs or prayer, but with a breath pellet made from frankincense, garlic leaf, and powdered silver. The man had been poisoned, he says, eyes wide. The lozenge absorbed the toxin. True story. You raise an eyebrow. Did the man live? Oh no, he died screaming. But his breath was excellent. You're not sure whether to laugh or run. And yet, there's something undeniably powerful about what you're making. You're not just masking foulness. You're part of a long, strange tradition of healing, purification, and social strategy, all tied to something as simple as what happens when you open your mouth. Some chew for ritual, some for health, some just because it makes flirting a little less horrifying. But beneath it all, you sense the ancient truth, in a land ruled by gods and spices, even your breath must bow to beauty. By the time you leave the herb hall, your fingers are stained orange with cinnamon oil, and you're buzzing with the faint clarity that comes from tasting too many spice balls in a row. You pass a street vendor selling date cakes and fried locusts. You wave him off. You don't want to ruin the breath you just earned. As the sun begins its slow descent behind the palm trees, the Nile glints like polished bronze. And you walk home with your tongue tingling from a paste made by mortals, but, just maybe, blessed by the gods. You're jolted awake before dawn by the thud of something hitting the courtyard. A spice crate. Another one. By the third slam, you give up pretending to sleep and drag yourself toward the temple gates, squinting at the flickering torchlight and trying to ignore the aftertaste of last night's sour lentil stew still haunting your tongue. They've arrived, traders from Punt. Their caravan is a dusty mirage of color, striped fabrics, golden jewelry, carved ivory tusks, and, most importantly, spices. Real spices. You smell the cargo before you see it. Cinnamon bark, cracked and fragrant. Frankincense resin, sticky and glowing in the torchlight like trapped sunlight. Myrrh in big, dark chunks like crystallized thunderclouds. And, tucked carefully in oiled linen, tiny bundles of cardamom, clove, and anise. These aren't just goods. These are sacred. Currency. Medicine. Power. And yes, fresh breath. You edge closer, half helper, half snoop, watching as scribes unroll long parchment scrolls and count every last twig and pod. One priest sniffs a cinnamon stick like it's wine. Another licks a drop of myrrh resin off his thumb, then hums softly in approval. This lot will make fine lozenges, one whispers, and you instinctively reach into your tunic pocket for your chewing ball from yesterday. Still intact. Still sweet. But now, surrounded by this tidal wave of imported aroma, it smells like old soup. Spices from Punt weren't always for breath. Some were burned in rituals. Others smeared on mummies. But somewhere between incense burner and medicine cabinet, a clever apothecary, or maybe a fed-up priest, started rolling them into honey balls to chew before ceremonies. Historians still argue whether this practice came directly from trade with Punt or if it evolved independently, but the timing lines up suspiciously well. You can imagine it now, some poor traveler tasting a Punt spice and thinking, hey, my mouth doesn't taste like dead frog anymore. You trail the caravan to the temple storeroom, pretending to help lift a jar while mostly inhaling. The cinnamon alone could start a small cult. One woman from the market, who'd somehow gotten through the guards, tries to buy a single clove with a bronze bangle. She's gently escorted out, clutching the spice like a sacred amulet. Later, you overhear the temple's spice master instructing the meatball makers. Use the fresh cloves sparingly. Too much in the priests will sound like angry donkeys during morning chants. You chuckle. Too much clove does make you sound like your tongue is rebelling. Then comes the honey, the glue of it all. Punt doesn't trade honey, so you're sent with a jar to the local beekeeper. His bees are aggressive, his beard full of twigs, and he calls you Cinnamon Boy for the rest of the day. Still, the honey is thick, dark, and strangely floral. You taste a drop and feel your molars tighten in alarm, but it'll be perfect for sticking spices together. Back at the apothecary bench, you watch the assistant prepare a new batch with the fresh cargo. He adds cinnamon in delicate pinches. A flake of myrrh. One whole clove, crushed under a stone pestle. Then, he does something unexpected. He grates a strip of dried orange peel into the mix. Came from a Nubian trader, he explains. Said it makes the breath smell like summer. You lean closer. He's not wrong. By now, your hands move instinctively, forming the pellet, rolling it in crushed mint leaf, setting it on a linen sheet to dry. You're proud of this one. It's small, warm in the fingers, and smells like a forest married a bakery. You pop one in your mouth and nearly sigh aloud. The cinnamon floods your tongue, followed by the cool sharpness of mint, then a lingering earthy sweetness from the honey and orange. You feel invincible. Like you could talk to a goddess and she'd lean in closer. You're not alone in this belief. The priests begin requesting custom blends. One wants a harsher taste to match his morning chants, another wants a softer lozenge to avoid cracking a molar. Even the cook asks for a batch to cover the smell of boiling fish in the temple's side kitchens. Word spreads fast. That evening, a scribe arrives with an official request scroll, inked in perfect hieroglyphs, to the apothecary's junior assistant, for delivery of 20 spice lozenges before the next moonrise. Ingredients must include cinnamon, honey, myrrh, clove, and no asafoetida, upon pain of exile. You laugh. Apparently, the last batch gave someone the hiccups and visions of baboons riding chariots. This is no longer just about rituals. It's fashion. It's flirtation. It's politics. Fresh breath has become a tool of power, and you, lowly assistant, are one of its architects. As you walk home, the spice scent clinging to your tunic, you imagine all the mouths that will chew your blend tomorrow. Priests. Scribes. Maybe even a noble or two. Somewhere in the shadows, a statue of Ammonius Rhea wears a carved smile, and you wonder if, deep down, even gods prefer cinnamon. You barely set your basket down when the palace summons arrives, rolled in gold-edged papyrus, stamped with the seal of the steward himself. Your hands tremble as you open it. The message is simple and heavy. The pharaoh's mouth must not offend the gods. Bring your best. You almost laugh, but it sticks in your throat. You're being summoned to the palace, not as a prisoner, not as a servant, but as a breath mint maker. That's how serious it's become. The palace is everything you imagine and more. Carved stone lions flank the entrance, their jaws open in eternal growls. Columns stretch skyward like petrified papyrus stalks, painted in the blue of lapis and the red of blood oranges. Inside, cool air flows through scented reeds, and you feel it, power, wealth, divinity, all wrapped in one sun-drenched corridor. A steward meets you, eyes lined with kohl, voice soft and urgent. His Majesty awakens with the sunrise. His mouth must be cleaned before his breath greets the gods. You nod, fumbling your satchel open, revealing your latest creations, tiny orbs of cinnamon and myrrh, coated in peppermint dust and stuck together with fig honey. You've added just a whisper of ginger for warmth and clarity. They smell incredible, but in this moment, you doubt everything. What if it's too strong? What if it's not strong enough? What if he spits it out and you vanish into a crocodile pit? You are led, barefoot, through polished halls, past servants scrubbing lotus petals into the floor tiles. At the final curtain, you stop. The steward raises an eyebrow. You bow. I'm ready. Inside, it's quiet. More of a temple than a bedroom. The pharaoh reclines on a couch of cedar and linen, sunlight washing across his face like a blessing. He doesn't look at you. Doesn't need to. He lifts a finger, and you step forward, heart thudding. You kneel. You offer the pellet on a polished shell. He takes it. He chews. Time freezes. Then, he nods once. Just once. But in that moment, you feel a door open in the sky. He says nothing else, but as you back away, the steward is already taking notes. The blend, he says, what's in it? You rattle off the ingredients, pulse hammering. And the ratio? You pause. It's not exact. I follow scent, texture, weight. It's art. He frowns, scribbles furiously. We'll need 50 more. Tomorrow. You are escorted out with more dignity than you entered. The guards don't sneer this time. One even sniffs curiously and mutters, smells like a holy bakery in here. Back at your workbench, you prepare the royal batch under tight supervision. You weigh the honey, count the cloves, grind the cinnamon bark to the consistency of fine dust. This time, you add just a hint of orange zest, subtle enough that no one will question it, bright enough to leave a lingering note of freshness. It's not just breath protection. It's morning ritual in candy form. As the sun dips low, a runner arrives with a second request. This one's from the Queen Mother. She wants the same lozenge, but less spicy, more soothing. The gods do not require a ton on fire, the message says. You sigh and start again. This is how it happens. One recipe becomes 2. Then 10. Then a dynasty of flavors, each tailored to a palace whim or sacred superstition. Historians still argue whether these breath mints were standardized for all nobles or adjusted daily. You know the truth, it depended entirely on who was chewing. Some of the scribes start calling you maker of mouth charms. The title sticks. And with the nickname comes perks. A silk robe from a grateful priestess. A jug of Nubian wine from the steward's aide. Even the palace cat allows you to pet it once without drawing blood. Then, one night, a new request, a blend for speeches. His Majesty will address the High Court tomorrow. He requires clarity of voice, calm of breath, and the scent of divine presence. You rise to the challenge. This time, you steep peppermint in water before mixing it into the honey. You add a pinch of saffron, not traditional, but the color alone whispers royalty. You crush fennel for clarity and tongue cooling, then finish with a dash of anise. The result? A lozenge that smells like wisdom and confidence, like sun-dried scrolls and cedarwood robes. The pharaoh uses it. The speech goes well. The high priest weeps. You are summoned again. By now, the palace keeps a small clay jar of your creations on hand at all times. They sit beside the makeup, the scented oils, the ceremonial scepters. A servant tells you, he reaches for one before praying, before speaking, before punishing. Your breath mints have become part of statecraft. And though no one says it out loud, you know, your work is in every whisper of incense, every low murmur of ritual, every softly spoken decree. Your lozenges, sweet, spiced, and divine, are as vital to this empire as the Nile. The perfumery is hidden behind a curtain of blue linen at the edge of the temple's outer court, a place so drenched in scent it makes your eyes water before you even step inside. You've heard whispers of this place before, always from dreamy-eyed novices or blushing scribes who claim the priestesses here breathe like roses and smell like Judgment Day in springtime. You weren't sure what that meant until now. Inside, it's another world entirely. The light is filtered through hanging petals and tinted glass, turning the air gold and pink. Shelves sag with jars of dried blossoms, tiny alabaster flasks of oil, and waxy resin lumps shaped like doves, moons, and very suspicious bananas. Somewhere near the back, a low bowl simmers over coals, releasing a curl of scent that makes your spine feel loose and your worries irrelevant. A priestess glides past you, yes, glides. There's no other word for it. Her robe whispers as she walks. She raises a pot to her nose, inhales, and sighs as if the gods just told her a secret. Then she turns to you. You're the one who made the Pharaoh's morning blend, she says, smiling. Good. We need your hands. You nod, awkwardly. Your hands are not particularly elegant. One still has honey stuck between the fingers. You're shown to a mixing bench and handed a leaf-thin tablet inscribed with a new challenge, a perfumed wafer, something smaller and more discreet than the royal pellets, light enough to hide in the folds of a gown, potent enough to refresh the breath after hours of prayer or flirtation. This isn't temple business. This is personal alchemy. The priestesses explain, breath must not betray intention. A seduction can be ruined by a clove too strong. A whispered spell must land like a breeze, not a slap. And so, they've spent years perfecting the balance, tiny discs that dissolve on the tongue, leaving behind only the trace of mint, rose, and desire. You help them mix a new batch. The base is honey-thin gum arabic, which dries into translucent wafers when spread on papyrus and left in the sun. Into it, they stir crushed violet petals, powdered mint, and a few pinches of cardamom. One priestess adds a drop of rose oil so fine that it vanishes on contact, only the scent remains. Don't chew, she warns, slipping a disc onto your tongue. Let it melt. You obey. It melts. The flavor arrives like a dream, soft, floral, with a cool breeze of mint that opens the nose and the mind. You close your eyes. When you open them, you realize 3 of the priestesses are watching you closely, nodding with quiet approval. You'll do, one says. And just like that, you've been recruited into the most mysterious breath cult in Egypt, the Circle of Perfumed Mouths. Not an official name, but you hear someone mutter it behind a curtain. These women aren't just perfumers. They're whisperers, charmers, keepers of the oldest seduction tools in history. One of them shows you an amphora filled with dried tangerine peel steeped in wine, a drinkable breath tonic used before negotiations, love letters, and sacred confessions. They let you taste it. It's divine. Also slightly dizzying. You learn more in one afternoon here than a month in the temple apothecary. That mint must be dried at night. That rose petals picked before dawn retain sweetness. That fennel masks garlic, but lemon balm amplifies charm. That chewing too soon after a kiss is a political insult, unless the kiss involved clove wine. Historians still argue whether this knowledge was ever written down. Some say secret scrolls of oral elegance were kept in locked ivory cases. Others believe it was passed mouth to mouth, literally, between priestesses, acolytes, and favored scribes. You've started to believe the latter. Nothing about this place feels like it wants to be archived. As the sun dips low, you're invited to test your own blend. You reach for the familiar, cinnamon, honey, but pause. This crowd requires something subtler. You grind a pinch of crushed lotus seed, mix it with rose powder and a single droplet of mint-infused water. Then, carefully, you mold it into a petal-shaped disc and place it on your own tongue. It works. Somehow. Better than the last boy, someone murmurs. That night, as you walk back to your quarter with your satchel filled with perfumed wafers, You pass a group of noble women heading into the festival pavilion. You recognize the scent trailing behind them, your blend. And suddenly, you understand. This isn't about masking bad breath. It's about shaping perception. Scent is memory. Flavor is persuasion. A well-crafted mint isn't just hygiene, it's strategy. A way to walk into a room and make people lean closer. Somewhere behind you, a priestess laughs like falling water. And you chew the last wafer, smiling as it melts. You don't expect the messenger. No one ever does. One minute you're sorting dried mint leaves by size. Yes, there is a reason. No, it doesn't make it more fun. And the next, a palace runner appears at the door like he materialized from perfume and panic. An emergency, he says, breathing hard. A scribe. His mouth. You blink. His mouth. What? He gestures wildly, flailing like a goose in heat. It smells like death. He's infected. Feverish. Moaning in a very undignified way. They say the stink's affecting morale. You drop the leaves, grab your satchel, and run. The scribe is a mess. He's propped up on an embroidered cushion in a side room of the palace archive, wrapped in linens that have clearly seen better, less sweaty days. His face is flushed, his eyes wild, and his mouth, oh gods, his mouth. You take one step closer and instantly regret it. The smell hits like a plague in vapor form. It's not just bad, it's wrong. Rancid. Metallic. With hints of old onion, bile, and despair. You've heard of breath of the dead, but this might actually summon them. Abscessed molar, a healer explains from behind a perfumed cloth. We can't pull it. Too close to a nerve. But if we can't fix the odor, the vizier's going to exile him just for showing up. You nod grimly. This is no longer about fresh breath. This is a rescue mission. You start with a rinse, honey water with mint oil and a touch of vinegar, swirled carefully in the mouth. The scribe gurgles and spits. You apply a paste of crushed clove and turmeric directly to the gums. He shrieks like a cat being shaved. Then, the final weapon, a lozenge you've been working on for palace stewards who handle meat all day. It's aggressive. You called it the mouth ember. Cinnamon. Clove. Myrrh. A hint of ground mustard seed. When he chews it, his eyes go wide. Then his breath hits the room again, and everyone flinches less. Progress. He nods slowly, dazed, but with the faintest hint of gratitude. The stink's not gone, but it's muted. Manageable. Surrounded by spice rather than rot. Later, after a second lozenge and a cool cloth to the forehead, he leans close and whispers, "It's the first time I've been able to pray without choking on my own words." You smile and hand him another. This incident spreads faster than plague rumors. Within a day, people are requesting emergency breath mints for fevers, bad dates, even funerals. You create a new line, deep cleansers, meant not just for polite society, but for saving dignity at the worst moments. One batch, made with cardamom, garlic milk extract, don't ask, and dried fig peel, ends up being chewed at a high court meeting during a heat wave. The result? Slight hiccups, minor hallucinations, and a burst of laughter from the high priestess that becomes a popular painting. Historians still argue whether these medicinal mints were intentional treatments or desperate improvisations. Some say the ingredients were symbolic, clove to ward off evil, cinnamon to honor the sun god, fig for fertility. Others think you were just throwing everything in the pot and hoping it didn't kill anyone. You know better. You were solving a problem with every tool available. Soon, even the dead start getting attention. You're summoned to a noblewoman's funeral rites. The embalming priests are struggling. The body is preserved, but the mouth? Still exuding the faint sourness of someone who spent a lifetime shouting at servants. The family wants her remembered more, sweetly. You craft a special mint for the afterlife. It's not for chewing, it's placed in the mouth, nestled beside amulets in gold foil. Honey, lotus root, and a thin disc of crushed cinnamon bark soaked in palm wine. The priest slips it into her open lips. And in that moment, you realize, this breath mint isn't just a tool for the living. It's an offering for the gods. As you walk back through the temple gates, exhausted but proud, someone calls after you. Do you have anything for nervous breath? You turn. A young initiate fidgets in his robe, eyes darting. There's a girl, at the festival tonight. You smile, pull a satchel from your belt, and hand him a small, amber-colored pellet. Chew slowly, you say. And don't forget to smile with your eyes. He runs off, hopeful. breath mints, saving mouths, scribe reputations, and maybe even young love, one spice ball at a time. It's the middle of the night when you first hear it, a soft chime, then the hush of voices in the alley just behind your workshop. You peek out through the reed mat and spot a figure leaning against the wall. Hooded, cloaked, suspiciously silent. Street seller. You wait a beat, then another, and when no guards appear to chase him off, you slide on your sandals and sneak out back. The seller eyes you with a grin that says he knows exactly who you are. Heard you're the Royal Mint Boy, he says, flicking a small disc toward you. You catch it midair. It smells like licorice and something smoky. You're not supposed to be here, you whisper. Neither are half my customers, he replies. You want to chew, or you want to preach? You glance around, then pop it into your mouth. It fizzes. Not in a violent way, but in a did I just eat a mint or accidentally inhale the stars kind of way. It's got peppermint, that much is clear, but also nutmeg, fennel, and something you can't place. The seller grins. Street blend. Made it myself. No two are alike. Turns out there's a whole underground network of these folks, breath sellers who hawk their wares after dark to people too poor or too proud to buy temple-sanctioned lozenges. Some do it for coin, others for trade, a mint for a favor, a pellet for a kiss, a chew ball for news you didn't hear from the guards. You follow him down a few alleys and land in the heart of the mint market, a makeshift bazaar lit by lanterns and moonlight, nestled between the old grain storehouse and the river wall. It's buzzing, literally and figuratively. People chew, laugh, argue over ingredients. One vendor insists her blend makes you dream faster. Another claims his helps you sing 2 octaves higher. A third, to your horror, is selling mint-coated locusts. Historians still argue whether these back-alley breath balls were folk remedies or just ancient Egyptian party favors. You suspect both. Some of these mints have actual medicinal value, charcoal, myrrh, mint, ginger, but others are pure entertainment. You try one that makes your tongue tingle for a full hour and gives you hiccups that sound suspiciously like songbirds. A woman at a corner stall invites you to test her prophecy chews. You laugh, but she shoves one in your mouth before you can say no. You chew. Nothing happens. Then she leans forward, dead serious. You're going to make a blend so famous they'll bury it in gold. You blink. What? Or maybe you'll just get kissed by a merchant's wife. Depends how your week goes. You don't know what was in that chew, but you leave her stall feeling half amused, half worried, and strangely determined. Back at your bench the next day, your hands are full of inspiration and questions. These street sellers are using ingredients you've never seen: pickled tamarind, sandalwood dust, even dried hibiscus. They're not bound by temple rules or palace protocol. They're playing. So you try something unorthodox. You make a batch with fennel and orange peel, then add a drop of date molasses and a pinch of ground hibiscus. It's tart, bright, and when you hand one to the palace scribe, he chews, pauses, and says, "Tastes like getting away with something." Word spreads quickly. Your moon mints become a quiet hit, pellets designed for nighttime chewing. When incense fades and voices soften, they calm the nerves, cool the mouth, and, as one noblewoman whispers, make kisses taste better. You start leaving samples at the edges of the mint market, no charge. Just a stamped clay token with your maker's mark, a swirl like a peppermint spiral, now half-jokingly called the seal of sweet breath. Of course, not everyone's thrilled. The temple apothecary calls you in for a chat. You're encouraging experimentation, he says, brow furrowed like an unbaked loaf. What's next? Chewing balls with scorpion jelly? Only if it freshens breath, you deadpan. He doesn't laugh. Still, he doesn't forbid you either. Because deep down, even the temple can't deny it, something's changing. Breath mints aren't just tools for priests or nobles anymore. They've trickled into the streets, the alleys, the hands of guards, farmers, and flirtatious fishmongers. And the street sellers? They keep creating. Some of their blends are hideous. One mint makes your tongue go numb for a full day. Another supposedly cures heartbreak, but mostly causes hiccups and mild dizziness. But a few are genius. You begin collecting the best recipes, tweaking them, improving them. Adding clove where there was only pepper. Replacing bitter roots with dried rose hips. You're no longer just a palace mint boy. You're a bridge. Between temple and alley. Between ritual and rebellion. Between clean breath and bold expression. And as you chew a moon mint under the stars, You wonder, if a simple lozenge can change how someone speaks, what else might it change? The tomb smells like cedarwood and old promises. You're crouched just past the stone threshold, a flickering oil lamp in one hand and a small wrapped parcel in the other, your latest blend, sealed in beeswax and linen. It's not for chewing. Not this time. It's for the dead. You never thought you'd find yourself inside a burial chamber with nothing but silence, shadows, and a few rows of wide-eyed jackal gods staring back at you. The air is thick with incense burned long ago, still clinging to the carved walls like dust that learned how to sing. You swallow, your own breath echoing louder than it should. Behind you, the embalming team whispers instructions. Place it in the mouth, gently, like a farewell kiss. You nod. The body before you is wrapped with precision, the linen layers painted with protective symbols and tucked with amulets. The nobleman's face is covered with a gold mask, but his mouth, left slightly ajar per custom, is waiting, not just for spells or coins, but for something sweet to carry him beyond. You unwrap the blend. This isn't your usual fare. No clove bombs or tongue-tingling spice. This is delicate, sacred. It's made with lotus root and honey, pressed with a mint leaf, then dried slowly in sandalwood smoke. The mint is barely noticeable, just enough to calm the decay. The scent is soft, like a bedtime breath. You slip it into his mouth. It rests there like a whisper. This, you realize, is the final form of the breath mint. Not for flirting or freshening up after grilled goat, this is the breath of eternity. A last offering, a last attempt to keep things fresh when speaking to the gods of the next world. Historians still argue whether these funerary lozenges were symbolic or practical. Some say they masked odor for the mourners. Others believe they carried the soul's scent forward, like a fragrant business card handed to Osiris himself. Either way, you feel the weight of it now. You stay a moment longer in the tomb. In the quiet, you begin to notice every wall painting, every glyph, every golden tool has been touched by this man's breath at some point. He spoke prayers, shouted orders, whispered secrets. And now, here he is, silent. But thanks to your work, sweet. You leave the tomb in silence, your hands stained with honey and reverence. Back in the open air, the contrast is jarring. The sun hits your face like applause. You squint, then smile. You've left something behind. And maybe, just maybe, it will be remembered. That night, you're invited to a gathering of embalmers, scribes, and perfume makers. It's not an official meeting, just an informal exchange of ideas and oddities. You bring a jar of your afterlife blend. They bring dried myrrh balls, papyrus-scented resin, and a curious chewing gum made from tree bark. You try the bark. It tastes like ambition and tree sap. A young embalmer leans forward and says, "You know, some tombs are worse than others. One I entered last year reeked so badly I nearly passed out. Took me 3 days to smell normal again. You ever consider making something for us?" You blink. Like, a mint for tomb workers? Yes! Something strong. Really strong. Like, masking centuries of sour air strong. You grin. I might have just the thing. You spend the next week creating the most aggressive breath ball you've ever dared to roll. It's half spice, half warning label. Ginger root, black pepper, strong mint soaked in wine, then wrapped in clove leaf and dusted with dried orange peel. When you try one yourself, it hits your nose so hard you sneeze out loud and cry a little. Perfect. You name it the Tomb Raider. It becomes an immediate favorite among those who work in sealed places. One embalmer thanks you with a necklace of lapis and bone. Another just hugs you. You begin keeping 2 mint batches now, one for the living, one for the departed. The recipes start diverging. Living mints are bright, clever, flirtatious. Death mints are quiet, grounding, full of breath so steady it could lull a cobra to sleep. The people begin to notice. Someone coins a new nickname for you, the Mouthsmith. You pretend to dislike it, but you catch yourself carving it onto a clay jar later. Even the priests, rigid as ever, begin requesting blends for specific rites. One for funerals under the new moon. One for prayers to Sekhmet. One for when you suspect your cousin is plotting to steal your land, but you have to bless his ox anyway. You oblige. Each lozenge you roll carries more than scent now, it carries intention, memory, meaning. And when you walk through the city, past tombs and temples alike, you wonder, in a world built on breath and spirit, maybe the most sacred thing isn't what you say, but what rides on your breath when you say it. Your sandals crunch across sun-baked gravel as you trudge behind a column of dust and sweat, an army patrol on the edge of the desert, mouths dry, tempers drier. You're here on assignment, not as a soldier, but as something they've started calling the True Master. Glamorous. The captain requested breath pellets. Not for rank ceremonies or flirty priestesses, but for his scouts. You asked why. Because we march in close formation, he said flatly. And one more garlic-mouthed recruit breathing down my neck and I'll feed him to the vultures. Understood. So here you are, surrounded by leather, iron, and 30 men who look like they've been cooked in their own armor. The desert isn't kind, and neither is the food. You watch one man gnaw a strip of salted goat so dry it sounds like someone tearing linen. Another chokes down beer from a gourd that smells like old onions and a regretful camel. The result? A breath cocktail that could strip paint off a pyramid. You pass around your first batch, a hearty lozenge you've dubbed the Desert Whisper. Made from dried ginger, honey thyme, and powdered mint packed tightly into date paste pellets, it's designed to survive the heat, soothe dry mouths, and make army tents slightly less offensive. They chew suspiciously at first. Then, one by one, shoulders relax. Eyes widen. One man lets out a soft, accidental ah. The captain chews one and nods. You might live, he says. High praise. Over the next few days, you march with them, your bag of lozenges bumping at your hip. You learn how useful a good chew can be. It calms nerves before battle drills, keeps mouths from going too dry to shout orders, and even distracts from the scent of unwashed feet in a crowded tent. One soldier confesses he pops one before night guard duty, not just for the breath, but because the mint sharpens his thoughts, keeps him alert. Another says it keeps nightmares away, which is probably a lie, but you don't argue. Historians still argue whether soldiers were officially issued mints or if it was a battlefield hack pass between recruits. Two illustrations show warriors with small pouches, some say for flint or charms, others now believe for lozenges. You believe it. These men hoard your chews like gold. You start experimenting. One blend includes licorice root for stamina. Another adds a hint of lemon balm to settle nervous stomachs. A third, meant for long marches, includes dried tamarind rind. It puckers the mouth just enough to trigger salivation, making the water last longer. The favorites are the bravery balls, bold, spicy mints with a kick of black pepper and wine-infused clove. They taste like a slap and a hug all at once. You chew one during a sandstorm and feel like you could wrestle a god. Or at least a moderately aggressive ibex. Then comes a surprise request. Got anything that makes you smell good while you bleed? You look up. The scout is serious. He's cradling a bandaged arm and chewing on something that isn't yours. It smells like crushed disappointment. Battle lozenge, he says. For the dying. You pause. Then nod. That night, you stay up molding a new blend. This one isn't sweet. It's strong. Earthy. A base of honey and frankincense, blended with mint, cardamom, and a dash of rosemary. It's a farewell chew, a breath to carry into pain, maybe even into death. You hope it never gets used. But it does. The next morning, a young soldier passes. Arrow to the ribs. He dies smiling, a lozenge still tucked in his cheek. The others whisper about it for days. You say nothing. After that, every soldier asks for 2 mints before a patrol. One for the march. One for just in case. You begin making special rolls, embossed with tiny glyphs, strength, clarity, peace. You watch rough men touch them to their lips before tucking them away. Not because they believe in magic, necessarily, but because they've seen what happens when breath meets fear, and how a little flavor can tilt the balance toward calm. You leave the desert with sand in your hair, cracked heels, and a reputation among warriors you never asked for. They offer you a blade as thanks. You trade it for a kiss on the cheek from a grateful widow and 3 amphorae of date wine. The mints, though? They stay behind. Scouts chew them before entering foreign cities. Guards trade them before shift changes. And somewhere, deep in the dunes, a patrol chews your lozenges under starlight, hoping their breath carries strength all the way to dawn. The Midsummer Festival is loud, chaotic, and sticky, mostly because someone thought it was wise to serve honey beer before noon. The courtyard near the Temple of Hathor has turned into a swirl of laughter, harp music, and very questionable dance moves. You're just here to drop off a satchel of sweet clove wafers. That's the plan. But then you hear it, breath contest. 1 silver ring for the sweetest mouth in Thebes. You freeze. Surely not. You weave through the crowd and reach the makeshift platform, just a few planks stacked over the fountain, draped in blue cloth and surrounded by giggling noblewomen and board guards. And at the center? A nobleman, shirtless, sparkling with oil, holding a garland of papyrus blooms and dramatically sniffing the air like a sacred bloodhound. He calls out, "Contestants, present your breath. You were wrong. This is not a joke. This is a thing." People are lining up, chewing frantically, blowing toward the judges with all the confidence of someone about to confess to the gods. One woman even fans her breath with a lotus flower, as if that somehow elevates the effect. It doesn't. A scribe steps up, chews something, exhales toward the noble judge, and the judge recoils, dramatically falling into the arms of a servant. "Fish sauce," he wails. "Disqualified." "You can't help it." You laugh. Loudly. Unfortunately, that laugh earns you attention. The noble locks eyes with you. "You there!" With the suspicious satchel. You try to back away. You really do. But the crowd parts, hands pushing you forward. A chant begins. "Let him try! Let him try!" You sigh, step up, and unwrap one of your latest blends, a mild mint wafer dusted with cardamom and a kiss of rose essence. You place it on your tongue, close your eyes, and let it melt. When you exhale, the noble leans in. He doesn't flinch. Instead, he sighs dreamily. Smells like being hugged by the moon. You blink. "That's good," you ask. "You win," he shouts, lifting your hand like a prize melon. The crowd erupts. Someone hands you a silver ring. Someone else throws flower petals in your face. And a third, slightly drunk person yells, "Marry me." You politely decline. You step off the stage, dazed. A contest? For breath? It shouldn't surprise you. Breath mints have gone from temple tools to fashion accessories. Of course, this was the next step. Historians still argue whether this tradition began here or if it was borrowed from Nubian flirt festivals where lovers reportedly judged each other by breath alone. There's even a scroll fragment describing a kiss duel in which the loser had to eat raw onion as penance. Charming. Back at your stand, people now line up not just to buy, but to compete. Friends challenge each other to chew-offs. One couple argues over whether rose or orange blossom is more seductive. You quietly slip the woman a hybrid blend with both. She wins. Then come the grumblings. He used temple ingredients. His mints are rigged. Where's the lozenge inspector? Apparently, breath politics have arrived. You watch a competitor pull out a tiny metal tin, open it dramatically, and chew a shimmering green mint that smells like mint, soap, and hubris. He exhales toward the judges, who cough in unison. One turns to you and whispers, "You got anything that smells like forgiveness?" You do, in fact. It's a mild blend with dried fig, chamomile, and just a touch of wine-soaked anise. It smells like calm, like the opposite of ambition. You hand it to her. She smiles and drops a clay token in your jar, your growing collection of thanks. Later that evening, the champion round begins. It's down to 2 contestants, a perfumery apprentice with lips stained orange from saffron chew, and a flirtatious noblewoman who's reportedly been chewing your mints since lunch. The crowd is roaring. Bets are flying. Someone's dressed as a giant mint ball. The noblewoman wins, of course. She bows, winks at you, and whispers, "Your lozenges saved me from a very garlic-heavy breakfast." You nod, grateful, bewildered, a little in love. Afterward, you pack your satchel, richer in rings and rumor. You walk past a group of children playfully mimicking the contest, exhaling into each other's faces and giggling like maniacs. You smile. This, you realize, is how it spreads. Not through scrolls or speeches, but laughter, flirtation, and the simple desire to smell nice when someone leans in close. You turn toward home under the low pink dusk. In your mouth, a final lozenge melts slowly. A perfect blend of spice, memory, and soft sweetness. And in the distance, someone shouts, "Best breath in Thebes." You don't turn around. You just keep chewing. You sit hunched over a brittle roll of papyrus in the scribe hall, your fingers covered in clove oil and honey paste, trying not to sneeze from the plume of dried mint dust floating in the air. The scroll is cracked down the middle like old skin, and it's written in a frustratingly inconsistent script, probably a left-handed healer with delusions of elegance. It's a recipe archive, or so it claims. A dozen different formulas for oral purifications, each more contradictory than the last. The first line reads, "For sweet breath and clear thought, mix powdered fennel with cooled vinegar and chew before dawn." 3 lines later, "Never mix fennel and vinegar, unless you seek mouth confusion and foamy regret." You pinch the bridge of your nose. Across the table, another young scribe is arguing with a temple healer about tooth powder. Ground ostrich eggshell is essential, he insists. Without it, the teeth remain ghost-colored. Ghost-colored is healthy, the healer counters. Add clove for scent and chew with damp linen. That's how the pharaoh's great-grandmother kept her mouth clear until her last breath. Her teeth turned black. Exactly. Very fashionable. The debate escalates into something involving porcupine spine ash and whether onion juice was meant for teeth or revenge. You quietly gather your notes and slide out before someone asks your opinion on radish chewing. Historians still argue about these ancient recipes. Were they practical hygiene guides, ritual instructions, or elaborate jokes preserved out of sheer confusion? You suspect all 3. Back at your workshop, you experiment. You line up bowls filled with various powders: dried myrrh, cinnamon bark, pounded lotus seed, crushed clove, powdered onion peel, still a terrible idea, and yes, a sprinkle of eggshell just to test the theory. You mix them into small chewable pastes, add honey to bind, and roll them into discs. You chew one. It tastes like dust fought a candle and loss. You chew another. Better. A cooling hint. A flicker of mint. You chew a third. That one hits just right, fresh, spicy, and oddly comforting. You scribble notes with a satisfied sigh. Outside, a small line has formed at your door. Not nobles or priests this time. Just regular folk, a bread seller, a fisherman's wife, 2 young dancers from the Temple of Hathor. One of them says, "My mother says your mints make her feel less, curse." You nod, pass over a mild batch laced with clove and chamomile. Tell her to chew it after her prayers. Not before. They laugh, thank you, and shuffle off, already chewing. The dancer pauses and adds, "By the way, someone's selling a black mint in the South Quarter. Says it's your secret recipe." Your eyebrows climb. You haven't made any black mint. Time to investigate. You find it in a market stall, crude lozenges made from date paste, coal dust, and something vaguely spicy. The vendor swears it's blessed by temple spice masters and makes your breath irresistible to cats and kings alike. You try one. It tastes like betrayal and burnt toast. You politely suggest he remove your name. He offers you half the profits. You politely suggest he chew his own product until the stars speak to him. He agrees to rebrand it Dark Chew of unknown origins. Fair. Back at the workshop, you decide to make your own version, a proper dark mint. You call it the Shade. Made with molasses, mint oil, clove, and black sesame, it's rich, bold, and oddly elegant. You press a single mint into a stamped clay tablet and wrap it in palm fiber string. It sells out within 2 days. People ask for scrolls, recipes, ratios. But you hesitate. You've seen what happens when a formula gets passed around too fast. It mutates, loses meaning, becomes either legend or joke. You start writing your own recipe book, not for publication, but for safekeeping. The cover is simple, a mint leaf pressed in wax, the first breath preserved. You title it, On the Power of Mouths. Inside, you list not just ingredients, but situations. For fearful mornings, peppermint, fennel, rosemary. For lingering anger, anise, honey, lemon balm. For flirting by torchlight, rose, cinnamon, fig. For speaking to the dead, myrrh, mint, silence. And at the bottom of every page, a simple line, chew slowly. Let the breath remember. You close the scroll, light a lamp, and chew one last blend, a soft, steady mint meant for reflection. Your tongue tingles, your lungs open, and you smile. You're not just a maker now. You're a keeper. By now, your name is whispered in kitchens, temples, markets, even downriver in Nubia. Not shouted, of course. Whispered. Because it's your blends that matter, not your voice. They're carried in little jars and wax cloth pouches, tucked into sleeves and slipped into belt knots. And lately, you're being summoned more often, not to make a single mint, but to make hundreds. You enter the workshop on the east bank at sunrise. It's no longer a corner nook behind the apothecary's store, it's an operation. Wide tables, clay mortars, hanging racks of drying mint and strips of citrus peel. At least 4 assistants, each with the same dazed expression you used to wear when figuring out how not to coat yourself in honey every day. You pass a row of tiny molds, new, imported from Canaan. Round, square, lotus-shaped. One even molded like a tiny lion head. Cute, if not slightly unnerving when you're chewing it in the dark. Your newest client? The Merchant Guild. They want standardized lozenges, uniform in size, weight, and flavor. No surprises, they say. We're trying to impress Babylonian traders, not give them hallucinations. You oversee the mix carefully. Crushed mint, cardamom, a hint of orange zest, and a carefully measured drizzle of fig syrup. You resist the urge to get creative. No clove bombs. No floating ideas of rose and fennel. These are diplomacy mints. You pour the mixture into the molds, smooth the tops with wet fingers, and leave them to dry beneath the breeze of a reed fan laced with lemon water. It smells divine in here. Like success. One of your assistants leans in and whispers, "You know these are going as far as Byblos?" You nod. "They'll chew Egypt before they ever see it." He laughs. "You should carve your name into one." You don't. But you do press your spiral seal, quiet proof that the lozenge came from hands that know how to balance spice and silence. Historians still argue whether ancient Egypt industrialized breath mints in the modern sense, but records from warehouse scrolls and merchant ledgers show consistent quantities of aromatic pellets shipped alongside oils and perfumes. Some even list flavor variations, with nicknames like Sun Kiss or Pharaoh's Cough. You watch the rows of drying mints with quiet pride. You've created something scalable, consistent, and yet, something nags at you. Later that day, a temple courier arrives with a different kind of order. The high priest of Anubis requests a ceremonial batch, he says, breathless from running. Large quantity. No substitutions. Must be ready by the next eclipse. You blink. How many? 500. You do not blink again. For what ritual? He shrugs. Something with drums. And lions. You sigh and turn to your recipe scrolls. You already know which blend it will be, the Eclipse Chew. Heavy on clove, sharp and with ginger, bound with wine-reduced honey. You've only made it twice. Once for a royal birth, once for a funeral that went longer than expected. Your assistants groan when you tell them the quantity, but they get to work. They know this is bigger than commerce. The workshop turns rhythmic. Grinding, mixing, rolling. Your hands remember every ratio by feel. The scent grows darker, less flirtatious, more solemn. Like incense laced with memory. By nightfall, the floor is covered in finished mints, each one wrapped in thin linen and stamped with the Anubis glyph. You pack them carefully, knowing they'll be placed in mouths before chants begin, before drums rise, before gods arrive. The next morning, another request arrives. This time, from a river caravan heading south. Travel lozenges, the scroll reads. To ward off hunger, exhaustion, and unpleasant conversation. You grin and start a new blend. Pepper for alertness, lemon peel to cut thirst, mint to freshen and soothe. You add crushed date seed for substance and shape them into coins, flat and easy to tuck between cheek and molar. You call them wind mouths, for the way they make breath feel like cool air against the tongue. By now, your workshop smells like a living scroll. Every blend tells a story. Every jar hums with memory. Even the wrappers have evolved. Some are etched with small symbols, an eye, a lotus, a fish. One assistant suggests putting fortunes inside. Tell the chewer something about themselves. You raise an eyebrow. And what would yours say? He grins. You will chew. You will smile. You will kiss someone who thanks me for this mint. You laugh and write it down. Who says breathwork can't be fun? As the sun sets, you step outside and watch a boat slide down the Nile. A young couple sits at the stern. He leans close, says something. She laughs. From here, you can't hear the words, but you can see her pop a small brown lozenge into her mouth just before she kisses him. You smile, because you know that taste. Karnak always looms. Not just in size, though its columns feel like they hold up the sky itself, but in presence. Its shadows stretch across the city, across generations, across your very breath. Literally, in your case. You're summoned at twilight, which is rarely a good sign. The temple doors stand open just wide enough for you to slip through, like you're a secret being let in. You follow a junior priest who speaks only in vague phrases. He wishes to discuss purity. The breath must match the offering. Bring your recipe scrolls. You resist asking if this has anything to do with the noble who passed out after trying your black sesame chew too quickly. Instead, you walk deeper into Karnak, feet silent on sandstone, past god statues with eyes like eternity. You pass rooms that smell of crushed lilies and burnt myrrh, until finally you're led into a chamber half-lit with oil lamps and heavy with anticipation. There, seated among scrolls and scented braziers, is the High Lector priest. He doesn't look at you. He simply says, "We believe your mints are effective." A pause. "But," he adds, "not everything that is effective is appropriate. Here we go." He speaks in slow hieroglyphs, every sentence drawn out like a carving. The gods require constancy, symmetry, not variations of fennel flirtations and street-born experiments. You keep your tone steady. With respect, Holy One, breath is not the same at every hour. It changes with heat, with prayer, with fear. Should we not meet the breath where it lives? He looks at you for a long moment. Then he chuckles. You're lucky we like your cinnamon blend. It's a win, of sorts. The conversation turns, and he gestures for you to sit. Over a cup of hibiscus tea, he tells you of older times, when certain temple mints were said to call gods closer, when initiates chewed specific blends before opening sacred texts, and when an error in scent could mean starting an entire ritual over. Historians still argue whether these divine chews were metaphorical or real. Temple graffiti from Karnak describes a blend that opened the lungs to Ra's light. Another depicts a priest flat on the floor, eyes wide, surrounded by the symbols for garlic, fear, and regret. You've chewed things like that before. Then, the priest leans in. There's a recipe. Lost to time. Or rather, hoarded by the inner circle. The original divine breath. Your heart skips. You've heard whispers of a chew said to make the gods weep, to still jackals mid-howl, to make a pharaoh pause mid-sentence. It's not written down, he says. But I'll tell you what I remember. 1 part mint, 2 parts myrrh, crushed lotus petal, a fragment of date seed soaked in honey wine, ground ginger root, and red bark. Red bark, you ask? No one remembers the tree. That's the mystery. We called it silent wood. He smiles like a cat who's buried something interesting. Recreate it, if you can. No pressure. Back at your workshop, you get to work. The blend is rich, floral, almost shy. You try one chew, and it coats your mouth with warmth and something you can't name, like a childhood memory that isn't yours. You bring it back to Karnak 2 days later. The high priest doesn't chew it. He places it on his altar. Let the gods decide, he says. A week passes. Then a courier returns. No message. Just a small clay jar, sealed with red wax, and a single glyph, divine breath accepted. You exhale so hard you nearly pass out. The next day, a lesser priest slips into your workshop. You didn't hear it from me, he whispers, but a statue weeps now. Every evening. And smells, like mint and honey. Whether the gods are impressed or amused, you'll never know. But word spreads. Soon, every temple in the region sends messengers, each requesting Karnak chews. Some want exact replicas. Others want blends with similar reverence but less divine risk. You comply. You begin making temple-specific batches. For Sekhmet's rites, bold, peppery mints with fire-colored saffron and ginger. For Thoth's scribes, cooling chews laced with sage and mint, meant to clear the tongue for truth. For funerary chants, soft lozenges with lotus, myrrh, and silent root, meant to bridge breath and mourning. Each blend becomes a quiet form of prayer. One evening, you find a note tucked under your door. It's unsigned. Just 4 words, the gods are chewing. You smile, sit by your lamp, and start shaping another batch. You're summoned at dawn, not by a scroll or a steward, but by the soft, unrelenting knock of a pale hand at your threshold. It's Merit, the old midwife of the House of White Linen. You've seen her before, once by the temple ovens, once more leaning on a staff, half shadow, half story. Now, she stands in your doorway with a look that says this isn't about mints. My lady is dying, she says. You nod. You pack your things. The home is quiet. Too quiet. Wealth muffled in linen curtains and carved wood. You know the woman in question, Tyam. Widow of an architect, patron of 2 small shrines, known for throwing the kind of feasts that made poets weep from too much honey wine. She lies now beneath soft sheets, eyes closed, a thin trace of breath at the edge of her lips. Her daughters sit nearby. One weeps. One sings. The third just stares at the floor, the way people do when they're already saying goodbye in their minds. Merritt pulls you aside and whispers, "She was always fond of your lotus mint blend. Said it made her feel like the river." You nod, gently unwrap your last satchel, and choose a lozenge you made weeks ago, crafted for a merchant's voyage but never delivered. It has honey, clove, and a touch of crushed lotus. Sweet, warm, and clean. You place it on Tiam's tongue. You don't speak. You just sit. The lozenge melts slowly. Her breath grows lighter, less jagged. You imagine the mint clearing her final words before she even forms them. Her fingers twitch. Her lips part slightly. The room stills. And then, silence. Merritt touches her wrist, nods once, then closes Tiam's eyes with 2 fingers dusted in rose powder. The daughters begin to sob. But not loudly. There's no stench of death here. No foul breath. Only the faint scent of sweetness, still hanging like an afterthought in the air. A final breath, sweetened for the gods. You step outside, the morning barely lifting over the rooftops. You walk to the riverbank and sit. For a while, you say nothing. Then you take out one of your mints, not a special one. Just a quiet, balanced chew, mint, honey, chamomile. You let it soften on your tongue. You watch the sun rise. You remember how this started, your first batch, clove and regret, trying to mask the smell of priestly panic. The crocodile dung incident. The flirt mints, the temple mints, the marching soldiers' chew, the breath contest that nearly ended in scandal. All of it. Now, you're something else. A mouthsmith. A breather of prayers. The final touch before the silence. Back at the workshop, you prepare one last jar. Not for sale. Not for trade. Inside, you place a single lozenge of each blend you've ever made, rolled and wrapped in linen, labeled in tiny ink glyphs. You seal the jar with beeswax, mark it with your spiral stamp, and bury it beneath the northern wall. A breath archive. For the future. For the gods. For no one. A week later, someone paints your spiral symbol on a wall near the spice market. Not big. Not flashy. Just there. Another appears on a boat rudder. Then carved into a temple lintel. Then scribbled on the back of a love letter you happen to find fluttering in the wind. Your breath travels further than your feet ever will. And at night, when you lie down, you chew one soft mint, a sleep blend, your own secret, rose, mint, and the dust of dried fig blossom. It melts on your tongue like memory. And you sleep,